Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week's theme of revisiting bands, particularly bands or artists that I've only heard one song of. Today we're going to be returning to Alexisonfire, all one word. We checked them out last year, back in January, so it's been over a year since we've heard them. We checked out the song This Could Be Anywhere in the World, and I was quite impressed by the vocal work on display in the track. So that's something I'm going to be looking forward to as we dive into Rough Hands from the Crisis album that came out in 2006, which happens to be the same album that This Could Be Anywhere in the World came from. Let's dive in and see what Alexisonfire is bringing to the table with Rough Hands. I wonder if that piano part was a transition from the previous track? If not, that is a wild way to start the song. 4 notes and then remove the instrument. I love the waviness on the outside against the really solid directed vocals in the center. Interesting to contrast the harsh vocals against the light, ethereal, almost guitar work. Yeah, very fun drum part. Interesting rhythmic pattern on the vocal there. Call and response between the clean and the harsh. Yeah, dude. The strings and the piano, great way to set up on top of this atmosphere of the guitars and drums. It's a very interesting track emotionally, too. Here, I think it's the first time I really find a unification between what the music's doing and what the vocals are doing. as far on the heavier side. Yeah! Cool. I assume if there is something in this other 30 seconds here. Oh, I was going to say transition, but this is the final track. Okay. Just 30 seconds of silence. That's fair. All right. What in the world? Yeah, I enjoyed this. Solid post-hardcore song. It's a very cool juxtaposition between the instruments and the vocals in so many different ways. It creates this this contrast in many ways. Like at the beginning, as I mentioned, there's like these really wavy guitar sounds on the outside. You get the strum. It's like it's this cool, like, I don't know, mirage or like psychedelic thing going on. But against that, you have the very solid, very static sound of the vocals, the drums, and the bass. Everything here creating this very strong sense of physicality where the guitars are sort of mirage-like. We have that harsh contrast there. I think generally, other than that though, the light, somber vocal delivery fits really well with the light, somber atmosphere, the chord progression, the melody stuff that we get from the guitars. That is up until the harsh vocals come in. And then we have these harsh, aggressive vocals on top of dreary, kind of pulling the song down instrumental work. Where we did have synergy, now we have contrast, a sense of duality. I mentioned that towards the end of the song, I guess it was about 3.5 minutes in, we finally had the harsh vocals with some compressed, overdriven guitars. Big power chords, maybe, and just crafting this big atmosphere. The drums got a little bit heavier as far as attack goes, and finally everything sort of lined up on the heavier side of stuff here. That's really the only moment that the harsh vocals are paired with harsh sounding instrumentation. Every other time they're presented in that lighter, more ethereal and sort of dexterous guitar work, focusing more on small details of sound more so than large, heavy, overbearing sounds. So this contrast shows up quite a bit. And I kind of like this idea too, where we start off with cohesion, light vocals, light instrumental work, and then we find the division, we separate those two. But then we find cohesion, again, bringing everything heavy. And the duality that this creates, the fluctuating idea between being parallel and being perpendicular, I think is fascinating. To listen to that constant, I'd say, emotional contrast throughout the song. But by the same token, I think everything in here is rather negative. The song is rather dreary in most places. I don't necessarily think I would say depressive, but definitely on a lower energy side of things. While the aggressive vocals do have more energy to them and we get that contrast, it's still another negative emotion. It sounds angry to me, as some sort of heightened negativity. It's not necessarily just harsh vocals in general, although I do typically hear harsh vocals rather aggressively. But this specific kind of harsh vocal also, to me, just really leans into more of an aggressive stance. And so when we take this sad and dreariness and add in anger, this actually isn't too common. Isn't too uncommon. Pairing sadness and anger is a very common combination of emotions, and I think that's what makes this work so well. While there is an energy difference throughout most of this song, the emotions that are portrayed simultaneously tend to line up pretty well. And I think that's what makes it interesting when things do align, because we're taking sounds that are cohesive enough to operate in tangent and then saying, okay, at this moment, we're going to hyper focus on this one idea, whether that is the more dreary, bringing things down kind of idea of having the clean vocals and the lighter atmospheric work from the instruments, or the harsh vocals with the heavier distorted guitar, and really focusing in on one of those emotions rather than trying to explore this slightly more nuanced combination. It's a very cool way of navigating this song and exploring two different energy levels while still keeping everything contained and working well together. Now, the bass is very functional in this. We hear quite a bit of non-moving bass ideas, really laying into the harmonic element, making sure that we have this chordal component laid down for us, so we can always kind of know where the root tone is for the chord progression. The drums are also a bit functional, sitting well within the realm of being a metronome. Sitting in that pocket, laying down that beat for the rest of the band. There are some nice fills in here, but for the most part, the drums kind of sit in the background and they're that chord pulse. They keep the beat for everyone. It's a very important job. But there's more instruments than that, and I think this is where the song begins to shine, at least on the surface level area. There's some really nice, beautiful guitar ideas in here. Nothing that goes into the realm of spectacle. There's no shred or immediately noticeable difficult sections with the guitar, but it's just really thoughtful, semi-pensive, but dreary guitar melodies. I love these. I think they work well in tandem with the vocal melodies that also share many of these properties. We kind of get both of them at various times. If the vocals aren't going, we're going to get some guitar work. If the guitars aren't going, we're going to get some vocal work. However, when the harsh vocals come in, the guitars tend to be a bit of a supplement to it, adding in a bit of melodic variety where we've kind of lost that since we've pushed the vocals into the realm of texture and rhythm. It's a really nice way of ensuring that the song keeps a melodic pace throughout without ever having the song become overbearing in any ways. It also sets up this idea that you're never going to hear two melodies simultaneously. And while technically we still don't at the end, I like how it does get subverted just a hair bit in the final moments as we get both of the vocal parts. We get a clean vocal and a harsh vocal simultaneously. This was something I didn't think we were going to get, as when we do have the clean vocals, we don't ever hear them in the guitar really at the same time. They're trading off spaces. And when we do hear vocals and guitar at the same time, we've removed the melodic quality from the harshes. On top of that, the harshes and the vocals are separate. You don't ever hear them overlap at all. So when we get to the end and we get the overlapping vocals, yeah, dude, that was a good moment right there. And I think a fantastic way probably to wrap up the whole album. I think building to that peak, even just within this one track, but probably also across the entire album, that peak probably hits pretty hard for people. And I think that's just really great pacing and really great setting up of expectations and then even subverting their own. Nice way to bring all that together. The chorus, though, I find really interesting because of the rhythmic phrasing on the clean vocals. I'm still not too sure how I feel about it in isolation. It's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. It just never quite feels fluid in any way, and maybe that's the point. But I really love its rhythmic elements versus the harsh ones that we get at the end, and I think that just works wonders to have the harshes move quite a bit faster with these long held out and even syncopated notes on the cleans. It was something that worked okay but didn't make a lot of sense in isolation, but something that really clicks when you get the bigger picture, and that's always a concept that I find I enjoy, even if I don't get it in the moment. When everything clicks, that's a really big aha moment. And it's like, oh, that's what they've been building to. And then it's catharsis at that moment. Really lovely stuff. I think it's going to wrap up the analytical side of this video. It is a bit more on the simple side. A lot of it is functional or atmospheric. It's really looking at more of a sonic representation of music more so than a compositional one. But it is another song from Alexisonfire that absolutely makes me want to dig in. And honestly, I don't know why I haven't yet, since this is the album that they wowed me with last time with This Could Be Anywhere in the World. I'm sure this is on my list somewhere. I just gotta bump up the priority on it, I suppose, and get to it a bit sooner, because now I've heard 2 out of 11 tracks and I like both of them, so I'm pretty sure I'd enjoy the rest of it. Let me dive into some lyrics on this and then we're going to wrap this one up. Alright, this song, well, first of all, it looks like both times we visit the chorus, we have a duality of vocals, because there's 2 vocalists, a Dallas Green and a George Petit. I don't remember hearing the dual vocals the first time the chorus came around, but that did remind me that there's extra instrumentation in here I completely forgot about, and I loved that moment there. I guess it was the bridge, where we had the strings. What was that, a violin? Maybe the higher parts of a cello, and a piano, right? I don't remember what the higher pitched one was. The string, though, the bowed string was playing mostly chord progression stuff, and then the other instrument was melody. And this was just a beautifully somber little moment of maybe peace of some sort. It was positive, still dreary, still heavy, but optimistic, maybe, which I don't really hear too much of in the lyrics. So I don't know if maybe I just need to go back and listen to that again. But I remember hearing that and kind of getting a bit of an uplift, like, oh, we're changing a little bit in the song, and then you know, it doesn't seem like that lyrically, because every single part of the lyrics here is about the end of a relationship. Not necessarily the moment that it ends, but sort of leading up to it, knowing that what's happening right now, the way this relationship is, there's no stability to it. It's crumbling, it's falling apart, and it's too late to fix it. The chorus mentions this pretty much straightforwardly. There are a series of lines sung by one person while the other person just repeats the line, 2 people, too damaged, too much, too late. Just saying that these 2 people aren't going to work together. There's too much baggage, there's too much pain, there's too much that would need repaired, too much compromise needed, and it's too late in the relationship to even think about trying to repair all of this. What might have been small patches needed in the past have all crumbled and withered away, and now it's just a house full of holes. The first verse says, "Was I left behind? Someone tell me that I survived. And don't look so surprised that I'm home, even if it's just for tonight. With rough hands and sore eyes, so don't speak. I'm tired. Let's just live through this lie. So this person is usually not home. Maybe they have a tough job, long hours. Maybe they just don't get to see the other person too often. And they came home tonight, though. And their significant other seems surprised. And he's like, don't be surprised. But he says, I'm tired. My eyes are sore. My hands are rough. I don't want to talk to anybody. Let's live through this lie. The lie being that this relationship is something that works, that he can come home and have this other person there, and that they are in a loving relationship. It's just let me live through this for a little bit. Verse 2, she says, I swear too much, and she says a lot of things. Well, I'd swear every other word if I could, but for her, I'll make an attempt. Sometimes love isn't about how much someone suits you, but how much you're willing to change to suit them. And I think that's interesting. And he says, sometimes, yeah, you're just going to find the right person, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes relationships take more compromise than other relationships do. I think that's an interesting line. Something that I've never really thought about too much. There's always the knowledge that relationships of any sort, platonic, romantic, whatever, they're going to take compromise simply because you have another person who's entered into the equation. Their thoughts, their needs, their opinions, their perspective on things must be taken into account, even for actions that you think don't affect them. Because maybe those actions do affect them. Anytime you add more people to a group, you have more people that you need to be considerate about. And thus, you can't act only in your own interests anymore. That's where the compromise comes from. But the idea that some relationships require more compromise than others, it's something that makes a lot of sense on paper. As soon as I read it, I was like, yeah, duh. And then I was like, wait, whoa, like, yeah. I'd never thought about that before. It was always a blanket statement. Relationships require compromise, period. But like variability of compromisation. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is there. Various levels of compromise are needed in different situations, different relationships. How closely are two people tied? Or I guess, how closely are two people are their personalities linked? Because if you would do the same thing in my shoes, like 90% of the time, really what I have to change in my own life isn't much because, well, taking your opinion and thoughts into consideration is no different than really taking mine into consideration. But if you're two very different people, it might feel like walking on eggshells is doing anything. Anyways, I don't think this has a lot to do with the lyrics themselves. It just, that kind of blew me away for a moment. It's one of those things that just makes sense. You read it and you're like, yeah. But like, just never thought about it. Anyways, so I think this is interesting. He says, though, that sometimes love is about how much you're willing to change to suit someone else. And he says that he would swear every other word if he could, but for her, I'll make an attempt. He didn't say I'm going to change myself. He said I'll try. He's willing to make a change, but there's no guarantee. I don't know if that necessarily subverts what he said, but I do find that to be an interesting division mentally there. The chorus kicks in, and like I said, the harsh vocals say, two people, too damaged, too much, too late. The clean vocals say, all my bones are dust, and my heart is sealed with rust. These hands are always too rough. I know this won't count for much. basically talking about how damaged he is and taking a very physical form of damage, that the work that he's done in his life on a very literal level has made his hands calloused and rough. He doesn't have the soft, delicate touch that might be necessary for this other person. That no matter what the caveats that he makes in his life and the ways that he might bend and twist and change in order to suit this other person will never be enough. Even as he compromises, it's still going to be too rough. He says, though, I know this won't count for much. Basically saying that we were never really compatible. I've done as much bending backwards as I can for you, but I will never be the person you want me to be. And that doesn't really matter. I don't know what this line is supposed to imply, whether it won't matter to the other person, or if he just simply understands that getting into a relationship with this person created an expectation for him. And whether he was able to meet that or not didn't matter, but basically he signed that contract, knowingly or not, when he engaged in this relationship, that he was going to have to be different. A lot different. I think that's a very cool line right there to wrap things up on. Now, interestingly, though, verse 3, he says, one day my hands were too soft. One day she said, I'm tired. One day her clothes were on the floor, and one day empty bottles. Well, I'm not saying she's my last, I'm just saying that she could have been. It doesn't matter how rough these hands get, it doesn't matter because I'm not her man. Now, the first half here is about the ways that she is coping with this relationship. And I think the last part is the most evident one, that there's empty bottles. Now, that could be bottles of pills, could be bottles of alcohol. It doesn't really state, but it does imply substance abuse of some kind. She's not mentally dealing with this relationship very well either. He's overworking himself and she's turned to substance abuse. But he says that those days are behind us. This could have been the last relationship. This could have been the one where we got married and lived happily ever after. And he says, I would have liked that, but it doesn't matter because the relationship's over. He says, rough hands, rough days, rough nights, rough season, rough fights. Talking about how long this relationship has been going on in a less than optimal manner. That it started out as just having some bad days. And then we also had bad nights. And then we had entire seasons that, things just weren't great. And then the fights got real bad. But through all of this, it's always the rough hands. And this takes us back to the chorus. About two people, too damaged, too much, too late. And I think it's interesting that he carries all of this as baggage now. That this relationship has changed him. Maybe for the better, maybe for the worse, but it will be emotional baggage for him moving forward. Like he said, he thought this would be it. And it wasn't. That might change how he approaches future relationships. His hands are rough, not just from any work on a very literal level of maybe doing hard manual labor, but emotionally, the rough hands, his body's becoming calloused, his heart is becoming calloused. It's a metaphor for him as a whole. And so maybe life was pretty bad and that led to the relationship kind of being bad, but his relationship is now part of his life and it's made his heart and his hands rougher. It's only going to make the next relationship more difficult. Yeah. I think a lot of that matches the anger and sorrow, the negativity, the dreariness of the track. It's a mixture of all of that. There's a loneliness to this whole song about being in a relationship where you feel alone, but not wanting it to end, wanting to enjoy the lie, believing that this at one time might have been your last relationship, that she would have been the one. And the anger, I think, at the realization that all of this is only going to make the next relationship even harder. Yeah, that comes together really well. These are my thoughts. Alexisonfire, Rough Hands. What'd you think of this track? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you have your own interpretation or read on it. Let me know all of that and any other thoughts you might have. Put that stuff down in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.